If you don't send the money right now, he might not make it." My father's voice crackled through the phone speaker at exactly 1:04 a.m., sounding frantic and desperate, yet painfully familiar. I just stared up at the dark ceiling, the harsh blue glow of my screen casting shadows across my exhausted face. Then I uttered 6 words that instantly stunned him into silence. "Call your perfect son, Dad, not me." And then I hung up. My name is Lena Harwood. I am 32 years old, and for as long as I can possibly remember, I have been this family's designated walking ATM, the strictly responsible one, the chronically stable one, the only daughter they conveniently remembered existed whenever someone urgently needed something fixed. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Ryan, the absolute golden child, could literally burn the family home to the ground, and my parents would immediately blame the wind for carrying the match. So, when my father called demanding $40,000 for Ryan's sudden emergency surgery, it wasn't genuine concerns that washed over me. It was pure, bone-deep exhaustion. Years and years of relentless manipulation had drained me. I lay back down on my pillows, letting the heavy silence swallow the leftover adrenaline spiking in my veins. My apartment felt remarkably still and peaceful, a precious peace I had brutally fought for after clawing my way out of that family's toxic emotional quicksand. I tried to tell myself that Dad was just exaggerating like he always did, manipulating the narrative like he always did. And even if Ryan was actually in the emergency room, why on earth should I be the one funding his chaotic life yet again? But still, an anxious knot in my chest tightened, and a tiny, annoying voice whispered in the back of my mind, "What if this time it is actually real?" I forcefully pushed the guilt aside and forced my eyes shut to sleep. It obviously didn't last very long. At exactly 7:13 a.m. sharp, my cell phone violently buzzed again. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it until I saw the caller ID tag flash across the screen. East District Police Station. My breath hitched in my throat. "Hello," I croaked, my voice rough from sleep. A calm, authoritative male voice replied instantly. "Is this Lena Harwood?" I said yes. "We need you to come down to the precinct regarding your brother Ryan Harwood, as there has been a significant development." My stomach completely dropped. A development? What exactly does that mean? And is he okay? There was a tense pause on the line. It was too long and far too heavy. "Ma'ams, it is about what happened last night, and specifically about the person who called you." My blood instantly froze in my veins. "What about him?" I whispered into the receiver. The officer exhaled a slow, heavy breath. "That phone call wasn't exactly what you think it was." Before I could even formulate another question, he said, "Please just come down here immediately." My entire world tilted on its axis, and that terrifying moment was just the very beginning of the nightmare. The quiet drive to the East District Police Station felt entirely surreal, almost like I was physically moving through a thick fog that only grew denser the closer I got to the building. My racing mind kept frantically circling the exact same questions. Why on earth would the police call me directly? What specific development were they talking about? And what did they mean when they said the call wasn't what I thought? When I finally walked inside the sterile precinct, a uniformed officer at the front desk spotted me instantly, acting as if he had been eagerly waiting for my arrival. "Miss Harwood, please step right this way." He quickly led me down a remarkably quiet, dimly lit hallway and into a small, claustrophobic interview room. There were absolutely no handcuffs, no harsh accusations, just a scratched metal table, 2 cheap chairs, and a thick manila folder sitting unopened on the desk like it was physically holding its breath. A seasoned detective entered the room a moment later. He looked to be in his late 40s, possessing calm, calculating eyes and a grounded demeanor that instinctively made you brace for a heavy impact. "I am Detective Rowan," he said smoothly. "Thank you so much for coming in on such short notice. Please, have a seat." I lowered myself slowly into the metal chair, my palms completely ice-cold and sweating. "Detective, my brother, is he going to be okay?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second, and that tiny hesitation was a terrifying answer I genuinely didn't want to receive. "Ryan is currently stable," he stated carefully. "He underwent emergency medical treatment late last night." I exhaled a very shaky, ragged breath. "Then why exactly am I sitting here? My dad called me at 1 in the morning saying Ryan was dying." Rowan leaned forward slightly. "That is exactly what we need to talk about." He slowly slid the thick file toward me, but deliberately didn't open it. "Your father absolutely did not call 911. He did not drive Ryan to the hospital himself. He didn't even accompany him in the ambulance." I blinked in total confusion. "What then? Who did?" He completely left him there, the detective stated bluntly. Your father walked straight out of a local bar after getting into a massive screaming argument. Independent witnesses explicitly state that Ryan collapsed in the freezing parking lot about 10 minutes later. My rapid pulse thudded aggressively in my ears. No, I whispered, shaking my head. Dad explicitly told me he was standing right there with him. He said the trauma doctors needed the massive payment up front. Detective Rowan slowly shook his head in denial. He was absolutely not there, and that frantic phone call he made to you, we officially traced the timeline. He only called you after the hospital contacted him to report the medical incident. He wasn't panicking for Ryan's failing health. The detective's calm eyes suddenly hardened into steel. He was strictly panicking because your brother actively named him as the primary suspect in the initial police report. I just stared at him blankly. My dad was named for what? Rowan finally flipped open the heavy file. For legally abandoning an incapacitated adult in the middle of a severe medical crisis and possibly heavily contributing to the violent incident that actually put him in that parking lot. My churning stomach violently twisted, but he clearly wasn't finished delivering the bad news. There is significantly more, he said quietly. Your father also confidently told the hospital administration that you would be personally covering all of the exorbitant medical bills. He actively forged your signature on the binding financial responsibility form. The tiny room suddenly spun around me. My father hadn't been desperately asking for my help. He had been meticulously setting me up to take a massive financial fall, and the detective's very next words sent a devastating crack right down the center of my chest. Mrs. Harwood, this absolutely wasn't the first time he fraudulently used your name financially, was it? I instantly felt all the warm blood completely drain from my pale face because he was absolutely right. Which is why I didn't answer him at first. I simply couldn't. My dry mouth had gone completely numb, my racing heartbeat turning into a deafening, dull roar echoing in my ears. Detective Rowan didn't aggressively push me for an answer. He just sat there and patiently waited, letting the suffocating silence fill the tiny room like rapidly rising floodwater. Finally, I swallowed the lump in my throat. I truly don't know what you mean. He gave me a deeply knowing, sympathetic look. Lena, I have spoken to several people who confirm your father has a very long documented pattern. He acquires debts, demands massive favors, and constantly takes illegal shortcuts. And whenever serious trouble eventually shows up at his door, he always seems to have one specific person he heavily leans on to fix it. My tight throat completely closed up. Of course he did. He relied on the exact same person he had successfully guilt-tripped, emotionally manipulated, and financially strong-armed ever since she was 19 years old, me. I have made a few financial payments for him in the past, I quietly admitted, blindly staring at my aggressively shaking hands. Just exactly small really, but I foolishly thought. I abruptly stopped talking. The awful truth tasted incredibly bitter on my tongue. You genuinely thought helping him would magically keep the peace? Rowan finished softly for me. I nodded my head, deeply ashamed of how incredibly easily I had fallen right back into the toxic role of the family fixer, the ultimate protector, the designated scapegoat, basically anything my chaotic family desperately needed me to be, except a real person with actual boundaries. And your brother? Rowan gently asked. How exactly does he fit into all of this mess? I let out a weak, humorless laugh. Ryan is the golden sun, the center of their universe, the sole heir to absolutely every wild excuse my delusional parents ever invented. He can literally do absolutely no wrong in their eyes, even when he constantly is everything entirely wrong. Rowan carefully tapped the open file. According to multiple witnesses, your father and brother argued viciously about stolen monies last night. During the screaming match, someone specifically mentioned your name. A bartender clearly heard your dad say that you would pay it, because you always do. Those specific words violently punched straight through my chest. It wasn't a new revelation, but it still hurt like absolute hell. He has been actively using you as a guaranteed financial fallback for years, the detective calmly continued. But last night, he took it much further. He blatantly attempted to sign a legally binding hospital document under your legal name. Intensely burning anger began crawling up my rigid spine. So you are officially telling me that my own biological father tried to trap me with a $40,000 hospital bill right after abandoning my dying brother in a dirty parking lot? Rowan firmly nodded once. Why exactly did you bring me here? I demanded. What do you honestly expect me to do about this? His strong jaw tightened noticeably. Because the hospital has clear security footage of him physically forging your signature. They are currently preparing a massive corporate fraud claim, and, his sharp eyes locked directly onto mine, your father is actively trying to tell them that you fully authorized absolutely everything. My breath caught in my throat. He is blaming me? Rowan nodded again. And your brother? Once he finally woke up, he immediately backed your father's fake story. For a terrifying second, I literally couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. Ryan, my own brother, the one I had bailed out of serious legal trouble more times than I could possibly count, had turned on me. He said what? I whispered in shock. He claimed that you explicitly agreed to cover the massive bill, Rowan stated flatly. He told them that you have always taken care of him, and that this time was absolutely no different. The profound betrayal hit me exactly like a brutal physical blow to the ribs. My father had intentionally set me up for total financial ruin, and my precious brother, he had eagerly handed him the knife to do it. But it wasn't until a brand new thought flickered through my racing mind, a thought that was incredibly cold, perfectly quiet, and terrifyingly sharp, that absolutely everything inside me violently shifted. If they desperately wanted a villain to blame, they were finally about to meet a real one. The sprawling hospital smelled exactly like cheap disinfectant and profound betrayal. Detective Rowan officially walked me right through the sliding automatic doors, casually flashing his shiny gold badge to clear us completely past the nervous front desk staff. I moved entirely on autopilot, my cold fingers curled into tight fists so intensely that my sharp nails violently bit into my own skin. A small, pathetic part of me desperately wanted to turn around and run away. That was the weak part, still foolishly clinging to the pathetic fantasy that my family wouldn't actually go this far to ruin me. But the other, much stronger part, the part that had been ruthlessly stepped on, endlessly used, and casually discarded like trash, deeply needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed the horrific truth permanently burned into my memory so I would never, ever forget exactly who they truly were. We abruptly stopped right outside a private recovery room featuring a half-open sliding glass door. Rowan silently gestured inside. Your brother is wide awake now. The senior hospital administrator is currently in there with him. You really should hear this pathetic lie for yourself. I stepped into the room completely silently. Ryan lay pitifully in the sterile bed, looking incredibly pale but fully conscious, one arm heavily wrapped in IV tubing. My father sat aggressively beside him, hunched intensely forward, speaking incredibly fast to the administrator, a stern-looking woman clutching a metal clipboard exactly like a lethal weapon. Dad absolutely didn't see me standing there. Not yet anyway. I already told you people, he said loudly, waving one hand highly dismissively. My daughter fully approved all of these exorbitant charges. She has always covered for him financially. Do not drag our family into this legal nonsense. She is totally good for the money. The administrator didn't even blink at his outburst. Sir, the signature on this binding document does not match her previous medical records, and she has deliberately not answered a single one of our emergency confirmation calls. My father loudly scoffed in annoyance. She specifically said she was half asleep when I called her in the middle of the night. Of course, she didn't remember the exact details, but she absolutely agreed to pay. My son desperately needed urgent medical care. What kind of heartless sister refuses to help with that? That was the exact moment I took a commanding step forward into the light. The kind of sister who was literally never asked, I stated coldly. Their heads violently snapped toward the doorway. My father's arrogant expression rapidly flickered through a series of emotions. Pure shock, genuine fear, and finally blinding anger. Ryan's pale face completely drained of color just as quickly as his dripping eye bag. Lena! Dad stammered nervously. Good, you are here, good. You can quickly clear all of this up for them. Tell this woman you fully approved the charges. I absolutely didn't, I cut in sharply, my voice echoing in the sterile room. And we both clearly know that you illegally forged my name. The administrator looked sharply between us, her cold eyes narrowing with extreme suspicion. My father instantly stood up, trying to physically intimidate me. Do not be so ridiculously dramatic, Lena. You are blowing this minor issue entirely out of proportion. Am I? I asked smoothly. My voice didn't shake at all. For the very first time in years, it didn't shake even a fraction of an inch. Because according to the local police department, legally abandoning your injured son right after he violently captured in a freezing parking lot and then casually committing corporate financial fraud is actually very much in proportion. Ryan nervously swallowed hard. Lena, look, please. Dad really didn't mean to. I instantly held up a firm hand to silence him. Save it, Ryan. You willingly let him physically write my legal name on that binding form. You happily let him blame me to save yourselves. He shamefully looked away, his jaw tightening in defeat. The administrator slowly turned to face me. Miss Harwood, would you like to formally and officially dispute these fraudulent charges? My father's eyes widened in sheer panic. Lena, do not you dare do this. And right there it was, the definitive, life-altering moment, the exact crack in the earth where the weak old version of me finally fell away, and the brand-new, ruthless version of me aggressively rose from the ashes. I met the administrator's intense gaze without flinching. I absolutely and unequivocally dispute every single one of them. Dad violently lunged forward in a rage. You ungrateful little. Hospital security stepped in instantly, physically blocking his path, but I clearly wasn't done yet. Because exactly when I turned my back to leave, Dad desperately shouted after me. If you actually do this to us, you are officially no longer a part of this family. I slowly stopped in the hospital doorway and looked back over my shoulder. Good, I said incredibly softly, a cold smile touching my lips. Then that means you can't ever use me again. The heavy sliding door hissed shut directly behind me, and that was merely the very first devastating strike. I sat completely alone in my parked car for a very long minute after leaving the hospital, gripping the leather steering wheel until my white knuckles physically ached. My father's desperate, hateful words still echoed loudly in my ears. If you do this, you are no longer part of this family. For the vast majority of my entire life, hearing that specific sentence would have utterly shattered my soul. I would have instantly bent over backwards, broken my own boundaries, frantically apologized, and desperately paid whatever ridiculous amount they demanded just to stay safely included, just to actively avoid being cast out into the cold. But not anymore. Not after absolutely everything they just pulled. The brutal truth was incredibly simple. I had always been entirely alone in that toxic family my entire life. Today's events merely made it legally official. I peacefully let the final lingering remnants of that old, pathetic pain burn out completely, exactly like the last glowing ember of a dying fire. And once the blinding smoke completely cleared from my mind, all that remained was a freezing, startling, absolute clarity. They hadn't just financially used me, they had aggressively assumed total ownership of my life. My personal finances, my precious time, my blind loyalty, my mental peace. They considered it all theirs on demand. They genuinely thought I would simply keep paying their debts, because they deeply believed I had absolutely no other choice. Well, they were about to brutally learn exactly how completely wrong they were. I calmly opened my phone, pulled up my blank notes app, and methodically typed a single header at the very top. Revenge. Clean, highly legal, and devastatingly permanent. There would be absolutely no slashed tires in the night. There would be no dramatic screaming matches in the street. There would be no childish, emotional chaos whatsoever. No, I was going to systematically and ruthlessly dismantle all of their cozy safety nets one by agonizing one. The very first step was incredibly simple but highly effective. I needed to permanently cut absolutely every single access point they had to my life. They had memorized my primary bank card numbers years ago, keeping them just in case of an emergency. They secretly possessed digital login access to old accounts I had completely forgotten they even knew existed. My manipulative father had even once successfully talked a naive bank representative into entirely resetting a security pin because he claimed he was just a loving dad helping his forgetful daughter. Not anymore. I aggressively spent the next 3 continuous hours on the phone with absolutely every single banking institution, credit bureau, and government aid agency that could possibly be weaponized against me. I was ruthlessly resetting highly secure passwords, permanently revoking all authorized user statuses, placing maximum security fraud alerts, and aggressively blocking any and all secondary contacts. Step 2 involved meticulous documentation. I needed everything perfectly recorded. The forged hospital signature, the recorded midnight phone call, the official detective statement, the verified eyewitness accounts of the brutal bar incident. I built a massive paper trail sharp enough to deeply cut anyone who touched it. Step 3 was strictly ensuring that they could never, ever use my legal name or my pristine credit score ever again. I formally filed an extensive fraud claim, initiated total freezes on all of my credit reports, and strictly notified multiple financial institutions that absolutely no one, and I mean no one, was legally allowed to act on my behalf under any circumstances. And then finally came the absolute masterpiece, the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. This was the brilliant piece that would hit them significantly harder than any screaming physical confrontation ever possibly could. I was going to permanently sever myself legally, financially, and emotionally from their world and utterly leave them to face the severe legal consequences of their own horrific actions. There would be absolutely no financial shield, no convenient scapegoat, and definitely no wealthy daughter to magically bail them out of federal trouble. My father had aggressively shouted that I was no longer a part of the family. He had absolutely no idea exactly how terrifyingly real that statement was about to become. I didn't sleep a single wink that night, but it wasn't from lingering fear or anxiety. It was from calculated precision. True revenge, the specific kind that leaves a massive, lasting echo for generations, is absolutely never loud. It is terrifyingly quiet, ruthlessly calculated, and almost gentle in the exact way a razor-sharp blade silently glides just before it deeply cuts. By the next morning, every single moving piece of my master plan was perfectly aligned. The first aggressive move was directly contacting the hospital's legal billing department. A woman named Marcy picked up the line, her tone appropriately clipped and highly professional. "Miss Harwood, I clearly see your massive fraud dispute is currently in progress. How can I possibly assist you further?" I inhaled a slow, calming breath. "Marcy, I urgently need you to attach a legally binding sworn statement to the main account. One that explicitly clarifies I was absolutely not informed, did not provide any consent whatsoever, and will absolutely not be held financially responsible for a single cent of any charges related to the patient, Ryan Harwood." "Of course, ma'am." Her keyboard rapidly clicked in the background. "Would you strongly like us to also submit the security footage and the forged financial documents directly to the district prosecutor's office?" I smiled a remarkably faint, ice-cold smile. "Yes, please do exactly that." That was step one of the trap perfectly executed. Make the massive hospital system an incredibly active, highly motivated participant in their downfall. Step two required an entirely different kind of ruthless finesse. I calmly drove my car back to the local police station. Detective Rowan was already waiting to meet me in the busy lobby. "Are you ready for this?" he asked seriously. Oh, I was exponentially beyond ready. He quickly led me straight into a private observation room where my father would very soon be formally interviewed. But right before he arrived, Rowan officially helped me file an extensive, highly detailed identity fraud report. That massive legal report would permanently block my father from ever using my legal name for absolutely anything ever again. Not medical, not financial, not legal. It was the massive first brick wall aggressively going up. The towering second wall came directly next. Rowan officially recorded my sworn legal statement in full detail. I included absolutely every single detail of the frantic midnight call, every single past incident where my manipulative father used my identity without explicit permission, and every documented instance of extreme financial coercion. At the very end of the recording, he looked at me and asked, "Do you officially want to pursue federal criminal charges?" I vividly thought of my dad's hateful, screaming voice echoing in the hospital hallway. "You are no longer part of this family." "Yes," I said with total conviction. "Are you calm about this?" Rowan asked. "Absolute," I replied. "I want this fully on the permanent legal record." Just as we officially finished the paperwork, I heard extremely angry, heavy footsteps echoing violently in the adjacent hallway. It was my father. He aggressively stormed right into the precinct lobby, his face entirely red with rage, his eyes wild and scanting. Ryan pitifully followed closely behind him, being pushed in a standard hospital wheelchair, looking exactly like a terrified, pathetic puppy violently dragged into a massive thunderstorm. "Where exactly is she?" Dad aggressively shouted at the desk sergeant. "Where the hell is my daughter?" Detective Rowan calmly pushed open our door and stepped out. My father instantly froze dead in his tracks when he suddenly saw me sitting quietly across from the detective's desk, looking perfectly calm, perfectly composed, and entirely untouchable. "Mr. Harwood," Detective Rowan announced with booming, terrifying authority, "we urgently need to speak with you regarding the heavily forged financial documents and the pending adult abandonment criminal charges." My father's arrogant, red face completely drained of all color in an instant. "This has to be some kind of sick joke," he said incredibly weakly, his voice trembling. "She wouldn't actually do this to us. She wouldn't." "Oh, but I absolutely already had." And exactly when the stern, armed officer stepped forward and physically guided him away in shiny steel handcuffs for his formal criminal questioning, His terrified eyes desperately met mine one last time. For the very first time in my entire existence, my manipulative father looked genuinely, profoundly afraid of me.